Shalom. It's a great honor to be here. And I will try to speak slowly so the translation can be done in a good fashion. But I would like to welcome all of you, dear friends of the State of Israel, great Germans and dear Europeans, elected officials, people from the town, leaders of the Jewish community, people of the press. I am really encouraged to see so many great friends of Israel with outpouring support and indeed love for the State of Israel. I know that Europe is doing pretty well. And it is very important for me to be here as the representative of the State of Israel and to really pay homage to your great support, because your support is important for us, understanding that we are not alone, understanding that there are great voices in Europe which are voices of reason, which are voices of morality, which are voices of conscience, and also voices which make sense and understand really the interests, the intertwined interests between Israel and Europe, because the destiny and the future of Israel and the future of Europe are intertwined. And this is not only because we are part of the same culture, part of the same civilizations, believing in the same values, believing in the same ethos. It's also because of the future. And the future, unfortunately, at that point, is not certain because of things that happen in the Middle East. And things that happen in the Middle East directly affect Europe and directly affect Israel, and we can do a lot to help the people in the Middle East shape their future in a way which will bring about tolerance, which will bring about peaceful coexistence, which will bring about prosperity and cooperation, and which will bring really modernity and introduce reality and the future also to the peoples of the Middle East. The fact that Israel has been attacked or rejected by so many in the Middle East is not necessarily because we are Jewish. It's not because of territorial conflict. It cannot be a territorial conflict. Israel is such a small sliver of state out of the entire Middle East. We occupy only 1/3 of 1% of the entire Middle East. Very small sliver. We also offered territories so many times. This was not the case. People talk about 67 lines. Twice we returned to the 67 lines. May 2000 in Lebanon and August 2005 in the Gaza to the last inch. That didn't bring about peace. There were offers to Arafat and to Abu Mazen with far-reaching concessions. It's not territory. And as I mentioned, it's not because of what we do or our policies. It's because what we represent. And unfortunately, we represent the Judeo-Christian heritage, we represent Western civilizations, and we represent modernity and tolerance and strong civil societies and human rights and women empowerment and equality for all people, democracy and freedom of speech and free press and everything with what the Middle East lacks. And unfortunately, there are still many forces in the Middle East which do not like to see this coming. And the fact that they attack us, and I hear it from many in the Middle East, not in public areas but in small rooms, that they attack us because they see us as part of Europe. Well, we are part of Europe in our history, in our mentality, and I mentioned in our values. But this is not to say that we cannot coexist in the Middle East. And we do appreciate the fact that here in Europe, you have come to understand the other, to live with the other in really full democracy. I would like to see the same thing in the Middle East, especially as there are so many things now happening in the Middle East. People are talking about the so-called Arab Spring. The Arab Spring may be a little bit too advanced to talk about because it invokes the experience in Europe back in 1848 of the Spring of Nations. But in 1848, in the Spring of Nations, the people of Europe at that time, 50 years or so, 60 years after the French Revolution, were much more ready at the time for a real Spring of Nations. But even with the people of Europe then, much more ready than the people of the Middle East are now, it took more than 100 years for the Spring of Nations to bear its fruits. And in these 100 years, we all suffered 2 world wars with millions upon millions of casualties. So we have to beware of analogies. We have to beware of comparing apples to oranges. And we have to understand that what is happening in the Middle East is something unique. It's something unique because the Middle East, unlike any other region in the world, has never seen a democracy yet, has never seen a civil society yet. And when people talk, and we are now facing elections tomorrow in Tunisia, we have to understand, and I hope that the Tunisian people will have a successful elections, free elections, fair elections, democratic elections, open ones. But we have to understand that elections sometimes does not replace democratic values and democratic traditions. Elections sometimes should be at the last phase of the process, where the people have the authority and have the understanding and have the choice of plurality. And this is what we do not see yet in the Middle East. Certainly, the revolutions that we see around us is quite authentic. It's also very spontaneous, and rightly so. And what are the people protesting? Exactly everything that we have here, which is they're protesting against police state brutality, against killing indiscriminately, like we saw in Libya, and we see right now in Syria, we saw it in Iraq and other places. And they want to see equality. And this is what they fight. I believe this all puts into perspective of where Israel is, where Europe is, and why Israel-European connection is so very important. Because Israel is really a beacon of hope and of a model of how societies should run. And I do hope that all the countries around us, at some point, and sooner than later, will be democratic. But they will be democratic only if there will be true and authentic forces in the societies, and they will be able to separate themselves and to shield themselves and protect themselves from foreign interests and foreign involvement. Today, the biggest threat for democratic changes in the Arab world is Iran. Iran, unfortunately, is trying to hijack the revolutions in the Arab world, whether it's in Syria, where they support Assad so forcefully, whether it's in Libya, whether it's in Egypt or anywhere else. They are trying to use their agents and their activists to hijack the revolution to their end. And in fact, they want to replicate the Islamic Revolution in Tehran in 1979, and we cannot afford another Iran in the Middle East. So it is important for us in the international community to make sure that more pressure is being put on Iran right now, and we cannot postpone it for a later date. And it's imperative to put the pressure now, because now the pressure will come cheaply. Iran is very vulnerable economically, politically, socially, and with enough pressure that will signal to the Ayatollahs that yes, the international community is serious, this is the only way for them to stop, first suspend and then stop for good their illegal nuclear activities. And not only that, but also to stop their support for terrorism, their support for radicalism, whether directly or through their proxies in the Hamas and Hezbollah and others. Iran is dangerous not only because of its trying to hijack the agenda and revolutions in the Middle East, but also in penetration into other areas, whether it's in Africa, whether it's in Latin America, whether it's in Asia. Iran is a danger on a global scale, and now is the time to stop it. And stopping Iran will really give a chance for the peoples of the Middle East to shape their own future, to be their own societies. Each country is unique, each country, and we have the highest respect for their traditions, for their values, for their way of life, for their conduct, for their history. Each country and each people in the Middle East has to be able to shape their own future, but still, we cannot, of course, intervene. We cannot get involved, but we can help. We can help by being an example, a leading example in terms of politics, in terms of morality, and also by helping them economically, because the main problem in the Middle East today is the economy. We cannot, unfortunately, help them financially. Today, there are no spared cash or spared finances or resources, not in Europe, not in the United States. But guess what? There are plenty resources in the region itself. Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries, yes, they sit on mega-trillion funds, and it is within their interest to help build an industrial infrastructure that will give employment and dignity and future for the people of the Middle East. So I believe we can join together with funds from the region, the Gulf countries, the oil-rich countries, and with some help, professional help, which will help accountability and transparency, so the funds will go into the right places. I believe this will give the people of the region a future, a vision, and hope. This is what the people needs in the region, hope. Right now, what we see in all these revolutions, we see how the people are so anti, and rightly so. They're anti this brutality, their police state, and this tyrant conduct, but we don't see yet a positive agenda. So I believe it is very important to help them create a positive agenda. This will help the region, and at the same time will be a better world for all of us. One thing that the last year has proven is that the main problem in the Middle East is the deficit of democracy, the deficit of liberty, of human rights, of freedoms, and it's not the Palestinian problem. We did not see the peoples in Tahrir Square, or in Tunisia, or in Libya, or in Syria, or in Bahrain, or in Yemen, calling for solving the Palestinian problem or coming out because of the Palestinian problem. No. They are not buying. There is a new generation that doesn't buy the lies of the dictators of the old time that said all your problems is because of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. They don't buy it anymore. They understand that there is nothing to do. The Palestinian problem is a conflict, a national conflict. I hope not more than a national conflict. Some are trying to make it a religious conflict, like Hamas and Iran are trying to make it a religious war, and I hope they will not be able to do it. But it's a conflict which is no different than 45 other conflicts in the world, disputes on territory and disputes on national recognition. Yes, the Palestinian problem has to be resolved. It is our interest to resolve it, but not at the price of our own future and our own survival. And we will continue to offer our hand in peace to the Palestinians, to come to the table with mutual respect, with mutual recognition, sitting together, looking at each other's eyes, without preconditions and without any manipulations or any blame gaming, as we have seen so far. It was very unfortunate that the Palestinian leader, Mr. Abbas, not only refused to come to the table and negotiate with us, not only put preconditions, not only that after we made some gestures about his preconditions, including 10 months freeze of settlements, including recognition of a two-state solution, still he didn't come to the table and put more conditions. This is not a way to conduct negotiations. We have made peace. I think Israel has shown that we are ready for peace. We made peace with Egypt, we made peace with Jordan, with the painful concessions. We were ready to do the same, but not, as I said, not at the price of our survival, and there's still a chance for the Palestinians to come forward and sit with us and talk to us. It is not a zero-sum game. Both of us can win. And I want to say something else here. You know, politics, like diplomacy, is the art of the possible. Before I talk about the art of the possible, I just see here our mayor of Tel Aviv, Ron Huldai. I want to mention also Mayor Ron Huldai, which is a twin city of Frankfurt, and it gives me a great pleasure to announce Mayor Ron Huldai here. And now the mayor of Frankfurt came. So this was important enough. I'm really honored, Madam Mayor, that you're here together with Mayor Huldai, and I'm also very honored that Frankfurt and Tel Aviv are twin cities. And I think this is just a microcosmos. What we see between Frankfurt and Tel Aviv really is between Germany and Israel, between the Jewish people and the German people. So thank you very much, Madam Mayor, for what you do. Thank you, Mayor of Tel Aviv, for being here as well and strengthening the great relations which are so important before Germany and Israel. And now let me go back. Yes, this was very important. And now let me go back to where I stopped, if I remember where I stopped. If I didn't, I'll start from the beginning, if you will. But I want to make a point here, and I mentioned that diplomacy, like politics, is the art of the possible. And the enemy of the good, of what possible, is the perfect. And sometimes we can waste our lifetimes trying to look for a perfect solution which is not available at this point. And I'm calling to the Palestinians. I know that they have their demands. We have our demands. Maybe not all of the demands can be reconciled at the same time. So I'm saying, let's use the time for our benefit. Let's just not make a head-on collision, and let's think outside of the box. And if we cannot come to terms on all the issues, let's not leave the issues that we can agree on left alone and continue the conflict. So I say to the Palestinians, there is a lot we can agree on, and even if we do not agree on everything, we can agree on what we can agree and move forward after an interim agreement. An interim agreement is not a final agreement, but it's a win-win whereby we can trade Israeli security for Palestinian sovereignty, for Palestinian independence, and we can continue together to sew up all the details of the agreements, which are very, very, very difficult and complex. Why are they complex? Because we are going to sign a piece of paper, hopefully, a peace with the Palestinians, but a peace is not just a piece of paper. For us, a peace should not be an agreement between leaders, an agreement between governments. By the way, governments can come and go, unfortunately, as we see here so violently in the Middle East. But it's not just that. If there is no people's peace between the peoples, if it doesn't trickle down to the civil society, to the education system, to the economic cooperation, then it's not really peace, and it can be on a very shaky grounds and can be very ephemeral, very transient, not really lasting. We need a peace with security for generations, for eternity, and for that, every little detail matters. Recognition matters, Israel as a Jewish people, and by the way, when we say Israel is a Jewish people and the Palestinians say, no, it's anachronistic, we say we don't know what you're talking about. Because Judaism is not just a religion, it's also a nationality, it's ethnicity, it's a way of life, it's a civilization, it's traditions, it's our DNA. And just as we respect the Palestinians' rights for self-determination, they should accord us the same respect and recognize our right for self-determination, and we happen to determine ourselves as a Jewish state, Jewish democratic states. And this is not to say that non-Jews cannot live in our country, as they have been living in the last 63 years, with full equality, with the same opportunities, with great cooperation. So this is something which is not out of the ordinary. So there's an issue of recognition, which is very difficult. There is this issue of Jerusalem, of course, of refugees, of security arrangements, of final borders. All these issues, every little detail can change the faith and the future of the region and of our country. And this is why it is so important to make sure that we sign everything after we have agreed, after there is an agreement, a reconciliation, historic reconciliations, because the real game here, people talk about this two-state solution. By the way, for some reason the Palestinians consistently have dropped the two peoples. They're talking about a two-state solutions, not for two peoples anymore. When we say two states for two peoples, they do not repeat that, unfortunately. All these things have to be agreed and determined before a signature. But as I mentioned, it is very, very important that we know what the goal is. And the goal is not necessarily this two-state solution. The goal is real peace, is coexistence, is tolerance. The way to reach this peace is a two-state solution for two peoples. But the agreement, as I mentioned, the agreement should be after we know there is historic reconciliations with security, with respect, with justice for everybody. This is what we need to do. It's not easy, but it's the right thing to do. It's the only thing to do. And here, I come back to you here in Europe. In Europe, you have been witnessing generations and centuries of war and bloodshed, and you came now to be in the pinnacle of, I think, human history, coming together in great respect for each other, in great peace, in great economic cooperation, cultural cooperation. We would like to have the same in the Middle East. So this is why it's important to look up to you here in Europe as a great example. And as I mentioned to you, we are the little Europe in the Middle East, and we hope that at some point, sooner than later, we will have the same conduct that you have here in Europe also in the Middle East, and we can do it with the help of Europe. And when I talk about the help of Europe, it's with the help of Germany, as we see Germany as our best friend in Europe, as the leader of the European Union. And when I see all of you here, and I see the great support and the great friendship from German people, from Germany, I know, I'm encouraged, and I know that there is a great hope, not only for Israeli-German relations, not only for Israeli-European relations, but also a great hope for the region in the Middle East and of great cooperation between the Middle East and Europe. Because we do have, in Israel and Germany and Europe, not only the same, as I mentioned, the same values and ethos and traditions and hopes and dreams, but we also share the same interests. And interests are important. Just like you, we do not want to see international terrorism. We do not want to see radicalism and Islamic radicalism terrorism. Just like you, we do not want to see abuse of human rights. We do not want to see an influx of refugees, not to our country and not to Europe, which can really cause a lot of instabilities. Just like you, we would like to see the continued free flow of energy sources from the Middle East. And together, we can do it. With Germany, we have very unique and special relations, not just because of the past that we all know, but because of the future. Just like Germany, Israel is at the forefront of academic progress, high-tech innovation, and today, high-tech and innovation is the most important currency. And especially when we talk about the needs, not just in the region, the needs of a world that in less than a generation may reach 9 and 10 billion people. And we have to think now about food security, not just for us, but for all peoples in the world, because everybody will be affected. We need to think of water supplies. We need to think of medicine and medical care, quality of life. And this is where innovation comes. And this is why I am so privileged and I'm so happy to remind you here that we have such great close cooperation, Israeli and German government, on high-tech, on innovations. And today, in a world whereby human knowledge doubles itself every 14 months and accelerating, this is one asset of cooperation that we both benefit, Israel, Germany, and of course with Europe. We have joined the OECD, also greatly because of support from Germany a year and a half ago. We joined the CERN, the research and academic institutions, and many, many other corporations. Also, we are going to work, and we are working, the Israeli and German government, to help quality of life and standard of lives in Africa. And there is a joint project, Germany, Israel, to clean Lake Victoria in Africa, and also to help them produce better agriculture, sophisticated agriculture, and other industrial commodities. So there are many, many things which combine us together, not just because of the past, but also because of the future. And again, I want to thank you. It's really heart-warming to see the great support that you have. You understand what's at stake, because what's at stake is not just the Palestinian conflict. What's at stake is not just the future of Israel. It's the future of Europe. It's the future of the civilized community in the world. So I want to thank you for your support. Thank you for your help. And we will keep coming and visiting you as we hope that you will keep visiting us. Thank you very much.